Hi guys. UJ, thanks for hosting us. Prof. Frisky, Jason, Cav, Terrence, thanks for putting this together. It's pretty awesome. And Tasman as well for running around and making things happen. I pursued a coffee first strategy when I was designing my breakfast this morning. So lots of words will come out. Sense may not be made. We'll see what happens. So architecting happiness. When I first heard that, I thought, how audacious to think that we could actually do that. I don't think there are many professions that can have a conference that has a title like this and think that they can actually do that for people. Then I thought, actually, it's a great privilege. We are privileged to be in that place. You know, we are one of the few trades, and when I say we, I guess I'm talking about information architects, but in a large context, I think mostly in this audience, we would be probably more UX people who practice information architecture rather than just pure information architects. But we're in a very privileged place to be able to talk about something like this and to be able to make it happen. How is a very difficult thing. But when I was thinking about, what could I expound about? I was thinking about something that makes me really, really happy. And trying to understand, how do we architect such a thing? Those who know me will know that I'm a lover of music. I always have my headphones with me. When I wake up in the morning, I turn on the radio. When I'm showering, I'm doing the same thing, breakfast, driving, everything. I'm always listening to music. And largely, I'm listening to hip-hop music. Hip-hop music makes me very happy. The way I speak, I've only ever been to the States once. I was there for like 6 days, but the way I speak sounds like I've been there for a while. But that's only because I've listened to that much hip-hop music. It has a big influence in what I do. So that's what I actually want to talk about today. Is that so you're going to hear a lot of stuff about hip hop, more than you probably will want to know. But I also want to think about how making music is making something that makes people happy. As makers of things, could we learn from those folks to think about what it means to be a maker, and how do you put yourself in a position where you can make things that could make people happy? So there's this guy called J Live. He was born Justice Allah Cadet. He changed his name, and he's an artist called J Live, J-Live. He was born in Manhattan, New York, which is like in an area called the Spanish Harlem, which is like, if you imagine the island is this long thing, it's round about in the middle. It's an area that was full of Latino folks. He was born to a single mom, and he had lots of babysitters because his mom needed to work very hard to support the family and all of those things. And he's this guy who's he's about as tall as I am. He's very heavy set. He's got a receding hairline. He carries a big beard. He has this downturned mouth, which is really, really weird because it makes him look very sad, but he has a very contagious, positive personality about him. And when he was young, he had these babysitters, as I was saying, and they taught him how to read, how to play the piano, make music, unlike all the other kids in his neighborhood, who were pretty much playing around the roads, the streets, I guess, and not getting that much of an education. So he was making models in the basement and that kind of thing. At school, he wasn't very sporty, so he was a bit of a nerd, because obviously he's got he's very educated. He knows how to play the piano, he plays chess and stuff. His friends are out playing football and all these other things. And he wears these really thick Coke bottle glasses that make his eyes look really, really beady. So he was what they call the herb of the crew. He had very few friends and he had no street cred. That's who he was. So around the same time, about 15 minutes away from he was born, in an area called the South Bronx, hip-hop was being born. So hip-hop was only like 40 years old. What happened at the time is that it was just a party thing. So somebody would play a record and then somebody would get on the mic and would say some words. And people really enjoyed that. That was the thing. And then it became a fashion thing, and it became a culture, not just a music. And then beyond that, it became a business. And it became a commercial thing. One of the cool things about what was happening with hip-hop at the time is that there were no iPods. This stuff wasn't even, you couldn't buy it in the shops as much as you could. You couldn't hear it on the radio. There was no Walkman. The Walkman only came out like in 1981. This was like in the late 70s. And so what happened was You know, like you see those pictures of people with those big radios walking with them on their shoulders? That was actually happening, because that was the only way you could listen to the music on the move. There was no other way to do that. It was a thing that happened out loud a lot. It was parties, it was people playing it on the radios, playing it on the streets, and that sort of thing. And an interesting thing was that they used to sit on, like, I guess in South Africa you call it a stoop. And so people would hang out on the stoop, and then somebody would start clapping, and then they would make little riddles, make rhymes about stuff, you know, how cool their shoes were, or how well they could rhyme, and all these things. And this thing about how well they could rhyme is an interesting thing about hip-hop. Hip-hop is extremely self-referential. It loves to talk about itself. So what you'll find is if you listen to any self-respecting MC, rapper, 50 to 75% of its content is just about rapping. In particular, it's about how good he is at doing that thing. It's also about how great his shoes are, how great his cars are. Unfortunately, more recently, it's also about how many people he's killed, drug deals, all these kinds of things. But it is a very self-referential art form. The equivalent would be Mozart making an operetta about how great it is that he started writing at 5 and that he's written 600 pieces, and how whack Beethoven is because he hasn't been able to do that. It's that kind of thing. It's a really, really weird thing. No other art form talks about itself as much as hip-hop does. But what's interesting about that as makers is that we get together and we do, you know, World IA Day once a year, and that's the time that we get to talk about what we do. If you go to these conferences, that's what we do. As opposed to in hip-hop, the practice actually involves introspection. As you do the thing, you're thinking about the thing that you were doing and talking about that thing. It's like making wireframes about making wireframes, which is really, really crazy. So this was happening at the time. So these guys would be on the street corner and they'd be doing this thing. A lot of the kind of the back and forth was also dissing each other. So this was then about, you know, your rhymes are not as good as my rhymes, and this was called battle rapping. And what's important about that is that you literally had to show and prove on the spot in front of people how good you are. And whatever resulted at the end of that would be, you know, that would be your grade. That's what would result. That's, you know, that's how you kind of be seen on the street. And this was really important for our friend Jay Live, who, as I was saying, he was a bit of a nerd. So when he went to school, as I was saying, he didn't have that much of credibility. He didn't do sport or any of that stuff. But he was great at English, and he loved music. So it turns out that he was great at making battle raps. So at lunchtime with his friends in the school, someone would be banging on the table and he would be busting these rhymes and he would be blowing everybody out the water. And that's how he then got his credibility. You know, he was this guy who was known for making great rhymes, and that's what he did when he was a kid. And he would get to hang out with all the cool kids because he was great at doing this thing, and not because he was bigger or, you know, that he dressed fancy or any of those things. And that's how he developed. So as a teenager, he kept on doing this. So he would go to parties and he would be emceeing, and he was also DJing. So in hip hop, there are kind of three main practices, if you like. So you're on the mic and you write the words and then you rap over the beat, or you're the guy who makes the beat. That's called the producer. And so these two people will come together. And then there's the guy who makes it, and then there's the guy who plays it. So he's the guy with the two things, and he spins it and he plays that thing. Typically, you have three different people who do that. This guy does it all by himself. He's kind of this one-of-a-kind person who can do all these things, which is interesting because we, as practitioners of information architecture and user experience, we have to have this wide gamut of skills, all the way from the sketching to the storytelling to the facilitation to the presentation and all of those things. In the research, we do all of these things. So he was doing this as a teenager, going to parties, and he was making a name for himself. So much so that by the time he was 18, he was approached by a record label, and they said, "Listen, dude, you're killing it. You know, you don't have any publicity. You're not in any papers, but people know about you. They know about your music. We want to offer you a record deal, and we want to make you famous. You know, at what you're doing." And he was like, "Okay, cool, we can do this." So he made his first album, well, his first single, which was vinyl back then. There had two sides. One side was called Longevity, and the other side was called Bragging Rights. And this was in 1995. The longevity record was interesting because what he was talking about was the idea that you have to make good stuff to have longevity, which he's managed to do. He's been making music for like 15 years. A lot of people have come and gone, and even then it was happening. The other side was this record called Bragging Rights, which is just amazing because what he does is, so I was talking about DJing and MCing, so what he does is, instead of playing a record and singing over it, he takes a single record and it sits on two different turntables. and he rewinds both of these records at the same time, doing this crazy stuff to make a new song, and then he raps over that at the same time. It's amazing to watch. I mean, that was one of the first songs that he ever did, and that's what he's known for. So it's an amazing thing. So at the same time, so he releases the single, and now he's going to university. And these guys are loving his first single, and they're saying, listen, dude, we want you to give you a record deal. We want you to make like a full album and to do all the stuff. And as a rapper, that's the dream. You want to be signed to a major label because that's how you get known. That's how you get known around the world. And he's like, look, I want to do this. So he wants to make this album. It's going to be called The Best Part. And so while he's studying at university, all these producers, like big names, are calling him, and they're like, listen, dude, we want to be on your record. And he makes all these tracks for this album. So over a 3-year period, 95 to 98, he's making this record. And then by the end, what he did was he agreed with the record label because his mother was like, whatever happens, dude, you have to finish your school. So he orchestrated it so that his final year, he would kind of turn his album into his thesis because he was an English major. So his album would be his thesis, and then as soon as his university was finished, he would go and be an artist, and he would tour, and we would see him at stadiums and on TV and on the radio and all of those things. So that was the plan, but then life got in the way. So I just want to talk a little bit about record deals. So record deals are this weird thing where you will be, underground, nobody will know you. Then you'll be scouted by a record label, and then they'll come and make you a promise. We will give you millions, and then for those millions, we will pay for studio time. We will pay for you to work with the best of the best, and that will ultimately propel you into being a great artist. What they don't really say, what they didn't say, it's a very difficult thing, is that money that they put up front, they're going to claim back from you. So typically, like an artist on a CD that costs $14 will make like 20 cents. And then from that 20 cents, they will take back all the millions that they gave you. So you actually don't make any money with this stuff. And this guy was learning this stuff. He's come out of university, he's gone into this deal, and it's going to mess him up and all those things. So he gets into this record industry, and then he records the album, and he's ready to launch it. It was called The Best Part. And then the record label got bought by another one, and his album just got put on the shelf. And this is another thing that happens, which is that if the industry is responsible for the things that you are making, which, as in the case of the music industry, sometimes your stuff gets put on hold because of commerce, because of business, and it never goes live. Nobody will ever see what you've made. That's what happened to him. For 3 years, he couldn't do anything while these people were deliberating, and he decided to become a teacher. That was his second passion. So in the interim, he's gone from being this student to being an almost amazing musician to then being a teacher. So he's now teaching, and he teaches the English language. So this is what was going on with this guy. And this album, The Best Part, became known as one of the most bootlegged albums ever. So bootlegging means that you've made an album, it was supposed to be released, it doesn't get released, but everybody has it somehow. So it got, it was in the underground, MP3s were flying around, all this kind of thing, and everybody has it, and everybody's listening to it, but officially it hasn't come out yet, which made his record label very happy. He didn't make any money, but his name was out there, people still knew who he was. So in the last 15 years, he's continued to make records. He's made about 10 albums, and I've listened to him religiously since I first heard him in 2003. And what I got from him is several things. So he makes music that is, some people would call conscious. So he thinks about the things that are important to him, that are going on in his life, which is what hip-hop came from originally. And that's what he makes his music about. But secondly, the second most important thing that I've learned from him, I guess, is work ethic. This guy works hard because he does the whole thing himself. Where other people would have a record label and have an entourage that would do all the stuff, he does his own thing. So I saw him live. I had the opportunity to see him live once. If you go to his show, there's a desk where he's selling t-shirts before the show by himself. Then he goes to the stage, performs, and then afterwards he comes back out again to sell t-shirts after the show. And then he will go and he will carry his own bags into his taxi, and then he will go and do his radio interviews and all this stuff. This guy works damn hard to be where he is. And the reason he can do that, and the reason he does do that, is because after this thing that happened with the record company, he decided to remain independent of the major labels and the music industry. He went his own road, and he controls what he makes, and how he makes it, and when he makes it. And that, I think, is a key aspect of being able to make things that make people happy. Because if you have to do things that are dictated by business, the business can miss you, which is what happened to him. They stopped his record from going live. So this idea of work ethic is something that's really important. You have to work damn hard, and you have to make stuff that's really, really amazing. So this idea of bragging rights in the song that he makes, that's deep craft. He knows his stuff really, really well. And that's another important lesson that I've taken from what he's doing. So I just want to share a few things that, to just make a few points around what this could mean for us as people who are trying to make things that make people happy. I think the first point is that you have to be dope. Dope isn't good. You have to be amazing. You have to be good at what you do. This is not there can't be any excuses for this stuff. The theories that Jason is putting up, that stuff is hard. It's really, really, really hard. And you have to know what you're doing, particularly if people pay for what you're doing. So while this guy can be independent, he can make his own records, what we do, a lot of the time depends on industry. We get called in by the companies to come and fix the problems that they have and to help them to make amazing things. When you get called in, you have to be great. In South Africa, we have this fledgling industry that's really, really young. And we've struggled, Jason knows, he's been doing this for time in South Africa now. We had to go in and sell what we do before people would buy it and before we could do it. And all along the way, you have to keep convincing the people who are paying you to do this work why you were in the building. And you have to keep convincing them that you need these resources, you need to do these interviews and all this kind of stuff. If we are not good at doing that when we go in, we give our industry a bad name. We make it really difficult for the next guy to come in and to do good work. So you have to be dope. In hip-hop, what this means is that you need to be able to have great lyrics, great lyrical content, but there's this thing that they call cadence and flow. So this is about how the rhythm of the words that you're saying aligns with the rhythm of the music. You have to make this new rhythm. And so the way that you speak, you can speak really slowly, or you can speak in staccato, or you can do all of these things, and that determines how you make music. And so rappers, they spend a lot of time trying to make songs over different beats, because what that does is that increases their palates, that exposes them to a lot of different problems, rhythm problems, that they then can solve. And so they create this palette and their own style that allows them to be unique and known for what they're doing. And they continually have to do this. That's part of what it takes to be a rapper. For us, we also have to develop these skills that we have. Now, what's difficult in South Africa is that, for information architecture and all the UX skill sets, it's difficult to find a place where you can learn this stuff in South Africa in a formal context. But what's great is that on the web, this stuff is now free. You can get the best education from the best universities for the price of an internet connection. Stanford ACI courses are available on the web. That's worth doing. And we can't wait on industry and employers to teach us skills. So I work with folks who sometimes I get involved in interviews and people come in and go, what is your strategy for developing, people who are going to come and work here? My question is, what's your strategy for doing that? Because if you're waiting for the company to move you forward, they will only do so at a pace that suits them. Because if they're going to do that, they have to go to some investment board, someone has to ask for thousands, and they'll say, well, what are we going to get if we invest in this guy? That's going to slow you down. You have to do your own thing, at your own pace. That's your skill set, that's your asset, that's your value. That's what makes you amazing, that's what makes you dope. And that's all your responsibility and your control. So that's a key thing, that one of the key things that I learned from this guy is that, how dope you are is up to you, and you have to actually work at that, regardless of what's going on around you. That's how you can then make things that make people happy. Because otherwise, you will only be able to make the things that the industry requires you to make. That's not always where you want to be, what you want to be doing. The second thing is that battle rapping makes you better at what you're doing. So, as I was saying, battle rapping is when you have to go up against somebody in front of people, and you have to show and prove your skill, what you're doing. So, in our trade, it's easy to convince a client that what you've done is great. They don't know what they're buying really. And the project manager stands there and he says, look, if we don't change this is the best solution that we can do in the time. All of these things will allow you to get away with something that works, that is suitable. But the thing that I've enjoyed in the last year of working with some great guys is that we have to spar off against each other. If you have to defend your work in front of your peers, or with your peers, or debate your work with your peers, that is going to elevate the game. That's going to increase your skill set. And so this idea of getting together, and in Joburg we don't do this much. I think the Cape Town is better than us in it. Although you guys were running with like great thing a while back, but this whole idea of getting together, talking about ideas, sharing work, what are you doing, what have you been thinking about? This idea, these theories, they will move forward if we're only doing what clients want. We have to, as a community, I guess, get together and spar against each other and, pit our wits against each other. That's, a way that we can kind of elevate what we're doing. It's also great because then, we learn to critique. So critiquing is one of the key skills in what we do. It's being able to ask the question, is this good stuff? If it is, why? If it's not, why? It feels weird. It's not a good enough piece of feedback to improve. We have to have the language that actually articulates what is wrong with this thing. Why can people not achieve this task? Why is this information architecture wrong for this particular purpose? It's those kinds of things. So battle raps are great for kind of exposing yourself to that kind of critique. Maybe a bit harsh. But that's how you learn. Because outside of industry, there are a few vehicles that will allow us to advance in that area. J-Love has this thing where he says there is something unique about being able to write down how dope you are and to tell other people about it. So again, as I was saying, hip hop, a lot of it is just about talking about how good you are at what you do. This is, I guess, we make portfolios and that sort of thing, and we kind of, put those things out. But it's important for us to know what we're good at, and to let other people know that day. Because what that does for you is that you can then choose what kind of teams, what kind of projects you want to be involved in based on what you're good at. If you don't know, then you're going to struggle, and you're just going to be taking whatever is thrown at you as opposed to stuff that's going to move you forward. Or you're going to work with people who are not going to be able to complement your skill set. So knowing how good you are is a very important thing, and being able to articulate that very simply to yourself and to anybody else who might be asking. The other thing is that's interesting is that when a hip hop, and I think this isn't unique to hip hop. It's a lot of art that's made, even movies and that sort of thing. If you need to put 16 tracks on an album, you might make 40, right? And then what will happen is that, particularly if you're with a major label, you will have to negotiate which of those tracks is going to go into the album. So you're thinking, these are my favorites. These are the ones that I think, represent my style and my thoughts and the things that I want to do right now. The label is thinking about what's commercially viable right now. What other artists are out there? What are the themes that we want to talk about? So in hip hop, for example, hip hop came from a place of political consciousness. People wanted to talk about things that were going on. You go to the label and you want to talk about how bad the president is, and the label might say, whoa, that week is bad, so we're not going to ship that kind of thing. So the thing that you made that that you thought was really great may not make the final cut. And so what happens is there's this negotiation of what actually goes live. And in the work that we do, a lot of that happens as well. You might come up with some designs, some ideas that you think, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to ship. You go over to the client, and the client's like, no, I really like that button, I really wanted to move it there, and all those things. And because they're paying they're paying the price for what you're doing, sometimes you have to compromise what you do. This is just a part of the game, and it's what we do. But this is one of the struggles of, again, trying to achieve things that make people happy in a commercial context. You have to do this back and forth. But as a practitioner yourself, the things that you have made that represent the best of your skill set, those are the things that need to stay in your portfolio. If your portfolio only has the things that shipped, you will have that compromised album. The tracks that you really wanted to ship won't be there. So you have to keep those other ideas that get thrown out. Those are really, really important because those are reflective of what you were really thinking, of what was really possible and worth holding on to. Because those are your definition of good work. That's what you want to be able to share with others as well. So I spoke a lot about hip-hop being self-reflective, more of that. So the last, I guess, point that for me is really, really of import when it comes to what this guy was doing is that the place that he put himself in is what allowed him to make music that makes him happy and that makes other people happy. And those two happinesses are, I think, are very closely intertwined. I think that, makers are happiest when they make things that make other people happy. If we are making things that don't achieve that, we may be materially satisfied, but the thing that we made may not be satisfying. It may not be doing this. So putting yourself in a place where you can make things that can make other people happy will ultimately contribute to the happiness of the entire system. So as I was saying, hip hop was, all about this social commentary. The music industry was all about profit. So they were all saying, no, we want to make records that are, great for the club. We don't want to hear about what you think about George Bush or what you think about this. We just want you to make those records. That's what was going on. And so in the end, what ends up happening is you get stuff that is technically proficient. So, the production is great, the lyrics are great, all of these things. Well, the lyrics are put together well, the cadence, the flow, everything is there, but it's vacuous. It's not saying anything. It's what I would call good shit. It's really, really good, but it's not good. It's not actually doing anything. And so this guy, he steps out, he creates his own record label, and he thinks of himself as independent, and that's what he ends up doing. And this is an important thing because overseas in our trade, so Jason, you were talking about adaptive path and all those things. There's an interesting thing that's happening, which is that this idea of happiness, businesses, and you spoke about corporate as well. Corporate is rethinking what's going on here. So typically, we used to be hired in to build the website for the product, to build the website for that company, and to do that kind of work. But increasingly, what we do is being seen as a core part of strategy, of business strategy, right? So businesses are starting to kind of, grasp what we've been saying all along, which is that actually, if you make your customers happy, you can make profits. Now they see that you actually need to think about making customers happy to make the profits. It's no longer an option. The companies that are doing the very, very best stuff are no longer calling in the UX guy to fix a problem, to make things less bad. They're calling the UX guy in to shift the goalposts, to extend or to push the extent to which things can be amazing. That's what they're talking about. It's kind of maximizing this whole potential of what this company could actually make. So companies like Tesla, those guys are not making less bad. They are making super good. That's what they're aiming for, right? And all of that stuff is driven by design. Like the Tesla downloads an update every day, like wirelessly, and that can make the car faster, and you don't have to do anything. That's the kind of stuff that they're aiming for. If you own, I think it's the Roadster that they made an upgrade to this thing, and literally they're saying you don't buy, like if you bought like the 2011 3 Series, you're now going to buy the 2015 3 Series and get rid of the old one. They're saying you can do a software and a hardware upgrade to that first car to make it the second car. That's what they're talking about. That's a whole different shift, a whole different mindset, and that's a whole different way of thinking about the experience of owning a car over time that benefits people and also benefits the planet. They are aiming at super good, right? And design is right in the middle of that stuff. That's not like just an engineering thing. That's not just a business thing. Those aren't the people who are coming up with that. It's folks who do what we do, who are being asked to come in and solve those things. So the core of business and the core of corporate and the betterment of that kind of stuff, this idea of making happiness, that's happening, but we are being called closer to the beast as opposed to being on the outside, just making websites that are on the edge. Corporate wants us in, right in the middle. And so this is the idea of positioning, is to say, where do you want to be if you want to, or where do you need to be if you want to be making things that make people happy as it pertains to business. I think we have to be much closer to the core and position ourselves to be able to do that. We have to be in a position to understand that good design is good business, and we can't continue to, wait for even things like job offers to come along, and you only go to the ones that are available. There are opportunities to change things proactively, to approach business and to think about, okay, well, look, you're asking us to solve this small problem, which is on the periphery. It can't really make people happy. How do we get closer to the heart of the thing to actually solve that problem? That's the opportunity that affords us. That's the audacity of asking this question of, can we architect happiness? We have to be that bold. That's what I read here is, we have to be that bold to be able to think that way and to ask that of ourselves. Big corporate wants and needs UX. They own the product and the user relationship. So this is happening in healthcare, financial services, airlines, whatever it is. They all asking, how do we make our products better so that our customers can be happier, so that we can make profit? Those things are no longer separate. They're closely intertwined, and they're calling on us to kind of to work and think about that. And this is happening here in South Africa. It's not just a global thing. Even here in South Africa, big corporates are asking this question. They're saying, you know, and I'm sure if you guys have got LinkedIn profiles, you've had recruiters all over those things, right? And they're calling in, they're trying to say, you know, how do we do this stuff? And that's just, I think, a reflection of this trend of big corporate understanding that the core of the product, not the peripheral stuff, requires that user experience design. So I guess that's you know the most important lesson that I learned from this guy is, you know, you have to put yourself, you have to be in the right team, you have to be in the right company, and you have to be in the right industry to fulfill this potential, your potential, I guess, which is to make something that might make somebody happy. That's the opportunity we have, and that's what I read this is asking us for. You know, is to say, are you in the right place? Are you doing the right stuff? Are you the right guy to architect happiness?